Hello, everyone. It's Pojo back with one last. This should be the very last recorded, but probably not the last posted video on our little Pojo Talk series, which is going to be a series of vacation filler where we just talk about cards and talk about different topics that interest me in relation to Eternal. The last one, while I was posting up the first video, actually, someone asked for a draft guide. It's been a little while since we talked about it, so I wanted to talk about two things in draft. This is not going to be a full guide since these videos are about 10 minutes long. But in general, we are going to be talking about two things. The first thing I wanted to do was talk about a common form of drafting known as the bread theory. And then I also wanted to talk about sort of personal theories that I espouse on occasion when I'm picking cards for draft as well. So, if you haven't familiarized yourself with BREAD in reference to Magic, BREAD is an acronym that stands for bombs, removal, evasion, and arguing about what the D means. Aggro and then dregs, I think, is the usual common one, which basically says you should pick your bomb cards that will win the game first. You should pick removal after that because you need it. You should pick evasive units after that because those will provide you with the damage you need to win the game. And then you should pick aggressive stuff, and then anything else is filler. So basically a sort of prioritization that basically always allows for a very simple method of picking through all of your draft packs. Another way that I would approach it, and another way that I often consider when I am drafting, is that every deck is composed of a number of different things that it needs. Decks in general need reach, which is to say the ability to end the game. They need interaction, which is the ability to solve problems that your opponents are solving, typically removal. They need fixing. They need the ability to play their cards. And in draft, this is particularly important because if you are playing 7 games, you will lose one of them to not having good fixing if you don't pick fixing in your draft. So picking cards like Symbols and Silixes and Seek Powers actually does improve your draft percentage by quite a bit, especially if you can fit them into the deck. Now, obviously, some of these cards are going to be picked higher than others, but it's important to understand that your deck has a number of different needs. It needs 18 to 20 units, it needs a decent amount of actual tricks that are played quickly, it needs all of these different things, and when you have all of these things together and you sort of fulfilled all of your different needs, like for example addressing flyers or doing doing like the big power thing at the end that actually wins the game, playing the bomb is a very common thing to do, then that's going to help you sort of finish out the deck. What a deck particularly needs does depend on its game plan. So like if you're playing, for example, big time stuff, you need both ramp and also the ability to play the big units to play at the end of that ramp. If you're playing an aggressive deck, then you need small units and also a way to end the game to provide that final bit of reach. So think about a normal game of Eternal. Decide basically what it is that you need, and then sort of pick around that. In the current draft format, I agree that bombs are very important. I agree that removal is very important. I think the most important cards after that, and occasionally even before that, are cards with plunder. If you do not have early cards in the 1 to 2 slot with plunder, then very frequently you're going to find yourself in a game with a handful of cards that do not function, and you're going to mull that hand down to another handful of cards that do not function, and you're going to mull that hand down to another handful of cards which barely functions. Having plunder cards significantly increases the chance of a deck winning. So while in this first pick, we might pick the Wasteland Broker because it's a Wasteland Broker and it gives us a fun idea of what we want to do with the deck. In later picks, we are going to want to grab stuff like Eager Deputy and Monk Innovator because these cards are often frequently more valuable than, say, the Hunting Allosaur. It's pretty important to have plunder cards. I think that they're probably the most important cards in the format, but like obviously you do want removal. Removal is always the hardest thing to get, so it's good to pick it early because most people tend to pick it up very, very quickly, and then you don't see as much of it later on. What people are picking will also determine all sorts of this kind of thing. But yeah, remember that your deck is your plan. Your plan will need a lot of different things to succeed, and as you go along with picking, your needs will change. So that's an important aspect of draft, is that while there are a lot of direct ways to sort of get yourself into a good drafting mindset, particularly the bread format of just like bombs removal, evasion, and in my opinion, fixing comes somewhere in between evasion and aggro, and occasionally comes before evasion. Fixing is that important in Eternal. But like, if you have all of these things in mind, that's really, really good. But keep in mind as you're picking that once you're filling certain needs, you might need to fill out other things as well. You might build a really, really good deck with a lot of very, very good units in it, and then forget to have an answer to flyers in it and get wrecked by every single flying deck that there is. You might build a very aggressive deck and then not be able to deal with a big unit. Well, there's a lot of different things that can go wrong, and sort of figuring out what those problems are is one of the big challenges of every new set, and one of the things that you kind of have to overcome as time goes on. Yeah, okay, one last thing. When you're considering power sources, there's a particular rule that I use that I don't know that I've mentioned a lot in deck building, but it basically functions like this. A power source is only a power source if it costs 2 or less. So like a Seek Power or a Vara's Favor or a Caleb's Favor, something along those lines counts as a power source for me, because in the course of a game where I'm trying to play multiple power and get myself up to a 4 or a 5 drop, I will be able to mulligan my first hand and get a handful of 2, 3, or 4 power with a 33% chance of each. That's a guarantee for the mulligan and for the desperate mulligan that you will get 2, 3, or 4 power, and it will be an exact 33% chance of each. So no matter what, you will have 2 power in your hands. But if you are picking fixing to substitute power, which is typically a good idea since it thins out your deck and it makes it so that you play less power in the late game. Seek Powers and Favors are all like really, really good cards for making your deck more consistent in the late game while also giving you the power you need early on, and basically replace power cards in your deck up to like the 17th or 18th source, which are typically pretty necessary. Likewise for plunder cards, they do the same thing. They turn cards into power, which is really, really important for basically your first couple of turns. However, you have to keep in mind that this is only for stuff that is 1 or 2. A 3 power plunder card is good for getting into later stuff, and also some of the 3 power plunder cards are pretty good in general. For example, there's the 2/1 Yeti Taunt that gives you the ability to have like some interesting reach. It's not an insanely powerful card, but it definitely provides the deck with something that like a blue deck might not necessarily have with a decent amount of surge. But that card doesn't fix your power, because if you get stuck on 2, Yeti Taunt Chieftain is not going to solve that problem for you, especially since the card costs 2 influence. You need sources that cost 1 or 2, and those are what you can count as power sources. There's also ways to calculate power sources where you know that your baseline is 17 or 18. You can typically count plunders as 1, as long as you are willing to use those plunders on cards and you aren't going to be greedy with them. So if you're a big greed monker, then just add 17 power and use the plunders for other things. But also, like, okay, where was I? The problem with recording these live, sometimes you lose your place about 8 minutes in. Yeah, so like having those setups is very, very good. You just need it in the 1 to 2 power section. So yeah, there are ways. Oh yeah, okay. So there are ways to evaluate cards as like half power. For example, like cards like Herald Song or Devour are cards that help you draw through your deck and get 2 power draws a little bit more frequently, and those can be measured as like a third of a power or a half of a power because you're able to play them pretty early. And when you do, if you have the units to Devour, for example, it makes it more likely that you're going to draw power into your deck. So there are other things that you can add to your power count or subtract from your power count from making sure that you have distinctive power. So it's all a big calculation in terms of what 17 sources actually means, or what 18 sources actually means. And 18 sources is generally the baseline to shoot for. But yeah, keep in mind, 1 to 2 power cards, definitely very, very good. Other quick draft tips: 3-cost 3/3s are great. Get a lot of them. But like, yeah, removal definitely, bombs definitely, aggressive units definitely, evasive units definitely. But also keep in mind everything that your deck needs and how it's changing over the course of a game. All right, that's all for today. We'll definitely be talking about draft more in the future, but for now, that's it. And now it's like 2:30. I gotta go to bed. I have a big drive tomorrow. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all on July 9th. Cheers.